This is called the closing panel, because we're closing.
Oh,
Sorry.
not yet.
All right. What's become the tradition, I guess, is that at the end, we think about what we've learned and also think about what we're doing next. So you've got people that you recognise from sessions that we've run over the course of a few days, plus Irene, who's joined us. And I think what we want to think about here is some of the key themes. I'm going to try and pick up on some of the stuff that Sarah said, because I was lucky enough to sit and chat with her last night about we've got to keep going, So there's a little bit of nourishing our souls that comes from being in rooms like this and thinking about the energy that we've got from one another and the ways that we're going to convert that into more action. And what was that phrase, Robin, that you... Actual consistent doing. So that's where we're headed next, some actual consistent doing. But also, obviously, some of the key things that have come up over the days for you as participants and people who've shared in the conversation. So, Marley, I'm going to start with you because although we keep saying it, we're unbelievably grateful that we're here and that you've supported us as you have. But I'm also conscious that this is something for you to bring the community together for you as well. This is part of you being in the community and doing stuff. So how's it been for you? What's the highlights in the last couple of days for you in terms of learnings and takeaways?
Well, so firstly, just to say, this is really unusual because usually when I share a stage, it's with a bunch of men. So can we just give these fantastic women a round of applause? I remember last year I heard Jenny Fleury say at Apple, Google, and Microsoft, it's Sarah and Jenny, and it's women who whine. And I said, Chris Patno at Google. I was like, Chris, can you get me into that girls club? So it's nice to be part of this girls club, right, guys? Great to have you here. Leaders I respect, admire, and hope to continue to work with in the future. It's been great, Mark. Really great. It's such a source of pride for my team, this organization, and also me personally, if I'm being completely honest. It wasn't so long ago that I was that guy banging on the door, right? I've had a lot of people at different stages in their career, at different stages in their company going, hey, look, Marley, love what HSBC is doing. How do you get there? Somebody asked me about how do you build a career in accessibility. I'd say ask Sarah. It's a real sense of pride to have you all here. These great brands, these great people doing great stuff, all contributing in their own authentic way. And I really agree with that sense that actually there's a community of doers, and there's a real sense that every organization here is really making a difference, whether it's for their customers, our communities, or their own people. For me, the highlight is just a real mixture of industries and people. I think I've been watching TechShare Pro, participating for 2 years, but the diversity of the organizations and the individuals we have is really encouraging, right? And I hope next year we have more, because I think that's the only way we're going to come together as a global community to continue to move the needle. And then for our own organization, look, it's always fantastic. Having our own people play a game with Sven, be amazed by some of the tech that's on display, meet some of you. Thank you for being so generous with your time and inspiring, our people here at HSBC. So absolutely fantastic to have you guys here. You're very welcome.
Fantastic, thank you. And we've made a particular effort to bring in your team, your senior team as well. So we've heard from senior people within HSBC, which just illustrates really the relationships that you've built yourself, but also the fact that this organization is behind that movement. It's not just you leading it. We've got an amazing range of people who've joined us on the stage, and that's been really impressive. So thank you for that. Irene, first of all, could you introduce yourself, because you're not somebody who's been on stage. So can you tell me a bit about the work that you do? And also, I'm going to go right back to the beginning, because we are going to talk about the European Accessibility Act, but you reminded me about why that was important for you as well, because I think the global nature of what we're doing is probably more than we could have imagined 7 years ago when we started TechShare Pro, literally the global nature of the discussions we're having. And that's particularly true from the point of view of your sort of input and what you're learning from the event.
Yes. Thank you. So my name is Irene Mbari-Kirika. I'm the founder and executive director of InAble. InAble is a nonprofit that has mainly focused on providing digital skills training to blind and low vision students in Africa. So on a regular day, we have about 1,000 students on our program. It has been a very inspiring program, very tough, I have to admit. But at the same time, we do bring together African countries and the international community to talk about accessibility, because accessibility is very new in Africa. So we host the Inclusive Africa Conference. Next year will be our 5th year. It's been very successful. So I'm inviting all of you, May 14th through the 16th in Nairobi or virtually, to join us to talk about digital inclusion and share our experiences. So you talked about the EN.
Well, you've also done your work in Kenya in terms of the accessibility standards, which was that connection to the EA as well, in the sense of that broader picture, and that these things aren't happening in separate ways. I think that's a really great story.
Yeah. So actually last year, Kenya was the first country in Africa to develop a digital accessibility standard, which is really exactly the EN 301549. This was very important for us because as we were pushing accessibility in the country, most businesses were asking, what does Kenya expect of us? What does the government want? What's the standard? So we were able to collaborate with various partners, including Susanna here, and we were able to work with the Kenya government to develop Kenya's digital accessibility standard. And now what we find with this standard, we are in the process of actually creating awareness. What you find, it's a very technical document, but it's very important to make sure government and other stakeholders understand the standard. So we've been hosting a lot of awareness workshops, meeting with government and private sector companies to really create awareness before we move to the next stage of really implementation. So we are still in the early stages. But I think what's more interesting is we were having conversations around what about other African countries? What do they want? And we had a few countries that were very clear they want to do the same thing. Others are thinking maybe we need to develop one for our own country. And as we all know, we do not want every country to have their own version of a standard. So what we are doing, we're in the process of collaborating to see how can we develop a regional standard. And for me, it was interesting because I had no idea that there are regional bodies in Africa that are made up of the bureaus of standards. They're made up of like 43 African governments, and all they do is develop regional standards so that you don't have a different standard for Kenya, for Rwanda, for Nigeria. It will be all one standard. So that's something we are doing. And the whole idea is really just harmonization, just to make sure that if you're buying a product, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Apple or anything in Africa, it doesn't mean the standard changes as you move from one country to another. So for us, that's really exciting. And we're trying to make sure that we follow the global approach and we stay connected, because technology doesn't change because you're in Europe. And if you go somewhere in South Africa or in Kenya, it doesn't mean the technology changes. So I think it's great for us to have these conversations together and really learn from each other.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I go back to Mali. You're a global organization, and you've illustrated that a number of times, and I really wanted to draw that out. And Irene, that's a great story about the ways in which the community can connect up around these topics and prevent those sort of obstacles appearing, and learning from each other in these sorts of forums is such an important part of that. Jessica, that obviously applies to Microsoft, and we've talked about it a couple of times. What else have you talked about apart from EAA when you've been here over the last 2 days? Because yesterday, right at the beginning, we talked about that, but I've seen you a couple of times chatting. You've chatted to lots of other. What have you chatted to people?
It was either yesterday or a year ago. I don't know. It's been intense in a good way. You have such a group of brilliant, passionate folks here, and I've been taking notes on my phone the whole time because I've learned so many amazing nuggets I'm going to bring back. Procurement, the fundamentals, bug bashing, I think Matthew was talking about. These are all things that we're going to bring back. But I think, Molly, you throw out the gauntlet. You say we're going to be the most digitally accessible bank on the planet. That's a goal that you should all take back to your organizations and translate into your organization. What does that mean for you? So thank you for setting that tone. Representation has been really important. I really enjoyed the panel either yesterday or a year ago, where Shani was talking about people with disabilities are not, we're not underrepresented, we're over excluded. Isn't that powerful? And so the next time we come to a stage like this, when we see women on stage and we might be surprised, I mean, we're 50% of the population, we should be up here. But people with disabilities, we're 20% of the population. We shouldn't be surprised when we are represented on stages in the C-suite, in those very important, powerful conversations. That's where people with disabilities should be. So just a big thank you to everyone who's really taught me a whole lot over these last few days that we'll bring back to Microsoft.
Sure, thank you. Susanna, we were just talking about Funka Days. I think that was probably the first conference I went to that might have been anything like what we're doing today. Could you remind people who you are, but also remind people of what Funka Days was? Because that, you said it was 13 years ago, I think you said.
2008, I think was the first time.
15 years ago. So the reason I mentioned that, I think that community building stuff and the particular things you've mentioned there, Jessica, are about the nature of the community and the connections and how important there are. You've been involved in that building of those connections. So as well as reminding us about that, those events, do you feel like we're progressing and there's so much more of it happening and the people are much more positively connected? That's how it feels, because we're in a room where we're at the end of 2 long days where all we've talked about is accessibility. So it feels like everybody's talking about accessibility. But from your perspective, looking back over that time, is there this groundswell that we're being told? Does it feel genuinely like a change in approach?
That was 12 different questions, I think, but...
Pick your favorite.
pick any 3.
Yeah, so my name is Susanna, Laurin, and I'm here as the representative to the EU for International Association of Accessibility Professionals, IAAP. So thank you for having me again. And we also made a drop-in session yesterday that I think was recorded, so people can have a look if they want to become members or professionally certified. But at that time, in 2008, I was also the CEO of a small consultancy based in Sweden called Funka, and I was traveling mostly to the US for the CSUN event and other accessibility events, and there were some smaller things going on in Europe, but they were usually based on just one disability or one very specific part of accessibility, and I wanted to do something bigger. So we started the Accessibility Days of Funka in 2008, and at that time I think we were the biggest, or maybe not maybe, I don't know if we were the only ones, but at least we were early on doing also quite an ambitious setup of accessibility services. So actually we had quite a few people just coming to the conference to see how we did sign language and captions and things. And I mean, technology has really moved on since then. So that's one of the big things. And I absolutely think that now we have so much more collaboration and community build also with IAAP, who are now doing quite a few events around Europe as well. And I mean, and all over the world, Kenya has a great conference of its own, and been traveling to many other places as well. So yes, the community has definitely grown, and I think also the level of professionalism has grown. And my takeaway from these days are really collaboration, I think, and the need for collaboration across different industries and also within kind of the ecosystem. And I think that is what I'm hoping to see with the Accessibility Act, that we stop fixing the same problem 1 billion times, but rather a little bit like Sarah was talking about, that you can point to something and use your phone. So if your phone is the device that you prefer, then make the ticket machine or the whatever other device work together with the phone. Just use open APIs and make sure that the device that I feel comfortable using and the mode feel comfortable using can work with whatever. I hope that is where the Accessibility Act will lead us, even if that doesn't say anywhere, but kind of the multimodality piece is built into the whole, both the standard and the law, and that is what I think would be most useful for users moving forward.
And to pick up on the IAAP and the professionalization, that's a big change. I mean, numbers are increasing quickly. So that's also part of the community building, I think, isn't it? Creating links for professionals and peer groups and ways for us to connect together. And I know that's part of what IAAP is doing in your work in Europe, is finding those connections. So can you tell us a little bit about that? People may not know or may not appreciate just what they can get from their membership. across the piece?
Yes, so it's a member organization. We have more than 5,000 members, and a member can be one person, but also a big corporation with thousands of people in it. So it's much more than 5,000 individuals. And we provide, in the membership, you can feel that you're not alone in being an accessibility expert, of course, and learn from others. But we also provide professional certification that I think has been mentioned a couple of times. We need to make sure that people working with accessibility can prove their competences, and people who recruit or procure also need to know that they can pick the right supplier or the right person. So that's what we're doing, and right now we are also building more of a stepwise kind of accessibility journey for people who the goal may not be to be a certified professional kind of expert, but just in any company you need many boots on the ground and maybe all of your staff to have at least the basic training. So that is what we're piloting now with some of our premium members. I think we are piloting it early next year. So this will also be kind of a career path for the masses or the volume staff, which I think is equally important as having the super specialist. It's also important that kind of everyone knows the basics. And I think we are moving in that direction, but it's too slow if you look at the demand, especially in Europe, but probably everywhere.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I think IAAP is incrementally moving on in terms of that thing because of that groundswell of demand, I think. So, and so many professionals have been involved long enough now to be asking about the next phase of their own careers as well, of course. So I know AbilityNet is a founding member of the IAAP as well. So we always encourage anybody at events like this to find out more, go and learn out more about what's happening around that professional development. Kate, I guess because you were here last year, and because you're not an accessibility person, I think you sort of illustrate for us the step away from just accessibility and into disability inclusion as an event. And also as a community, there's a lot more connections being made in the way that we talk about collaborations and joining the dots. How's it felt for you being in the room? What sorts of things are you seeing that are positive or that you can see are part of that groundswell and change?
Wow, lots, Mark. I mean, firstly, thank you and congratulations. You know, this just gets better and better. You know, the energy, the quality of the discussion. And I have no doubt the outcomes and outputs would just be second to none. So, you know, for me, I suppose my three key takeaways, and, you know, they're based on Purple Space being a leadership delivery agent. You know, that's what we do, is to deliver the leadership know-how for change agents who are constantly having to, I suppose, uproot the deep-seated human resistors when it comes to disability inclusion. So my three takeaways: one is the necessity as human beings to put in the legwork to feel excited about the opportunities right in front of us and to plunder the circle of influence that we have around us. You know, I had the great pleasure of opening a conference with the remarkable Ian Stewart, a huge fan of his. And you know, he talks about his personal story, and he leans on stories to drive change throughout HSBC, and that's backed up by Marley and many, many others within the team. And although he's not unique, other great leaders use their stories to drive change. It is the case that some of the audience will, for some time in their career, be working in organisations that don't have that values-based. And that means you have to draw on it yourself. You have to draw on your own dignity and your values, because, you know, it would be easy to fall into a false sense of security after 2 days of deliciousness to think that it's all done, but it isn't. You know, meanwhile, back at the ranch, we've got to keep going. So my first takeaway is how, as individuals, as human beings, we have to find ways of energizing ourselves and using the circle of influence around us, particularly when organizations are resistant to change. I think the second one is that, yes, speakers and audience are the epitome of obstinacious human beings. You know, I talk about that in the last book that I wrote, Positively Purple. And, you know, I draw on that myself. I recognize myself. And it's a mashup of two words, being obstinate as well as tenacious. But having listened to the speakers and the things that you're doing to drive product accessibility or process reformation, or indeed build the business case for this in the first place. So that's wonderful. So if you don't have that, go find someone just as we leave. And I think lastly is the generosity of spirit. That's what I come away with. Is, there are always commercial sensitivities as why some companies can't share. And back in the day when I started in this game, it would be the case that some tech companies wouldn't speak to other tech companies. But this is a very generous space. And the work that so many leaders we've seen, I'm looking at Hector over here and listening to Sarah earlier, I'm going to miss lots of people out. But that generosity to build a better, more accessible, elegant and accessible working world to, for humanity. So yeah, that's my key takeaway. So keep going. It'll be the Albert Hall next year, I imagine, as well as all sorts in San Fran and everywhere. So yeah, congratulations. Great conference, Mark.
Fantastic, thank you. So one more question, each, just to warn you. Marley, what do you think's next for you? I'm particularly just thinking about within your organisations and what we're working on, because we've got these incredible mix of threads that have been over thing. What sort of sits in the front of 2024 for you in the sense of, okay, now I've got to get to this. What sorts of things do you see as on the horizon?
Yeah, very good, very good. I think for us, in terms of looking at the future, we've got the basics done, right? Accessibility is just in our design, it's in our DNA, it's how we do technology. And just to be clear, I talk a good game. We're not perfect, right? I don't want you guys to walk away going, "Hey, HSBC's got it done." We by no means haven't. We've got more work to do. But looking ahead, there's probably three themes. One, if we think about our own journey, we did start from a perspective of looking at effectively risk mitigation. That's where we started originally. To then, where we are today, which is a source of pride in terms of our work, alignment back to our values, and really delivering on the promises that we make. I think the future is making sure that this organization recognizes both the commercial contribution, whether it's through our customers, but also through our people. Somebody once said, purpose without profit is not sustainable. So that's probably the first part of looking at the future. The second is continuing to accelerate how it is we raise the flow for everyone, not just our customers and our own people. Whether it's the Train 1000 program, our apprenticeship program, which we formally start in January. We've hired 2 of them, one in the room, which I'm super excited about. And how do we actually multiply that? I'm talking to other organizations, advising them on how it is they can start their own program. I'll be honest, my team and I, and guys, I'm backed up by some really brilliant people, right? I can't name them all. They're absolutely amazing, just as passionate and far more capable than I am. But we really want to make that, we want to proliferate that in other organizations, right? And we chose to do it in a way that was risky, right? So what we could have done was put out a bunch of apprenticeship positions and then work with the likes of the BDF or Scope to bring in disabled and neurodiverse apprentices through the back door. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to do it as a form of positive action under the Equalities Act. I remember speaking to Kate, going, "Kate, I think I'm going to get a lot of heat for this potentially. Publicly, I'm going to put myself in the line and swallow that risk." Kate, as always, gave me some very sage advice. And you know what? I didn't get a kicking, which is wonderful. And actually, we're helping other organizations do this, because actually organizations are better when they represent the communities that they serve. I know we are at HSBC. The third is, of course, tapping in the power of potential of technology, right? I'd love to kind of pull out some of the sci-fi stuff that Sarah does, but we're a bank. But there's some cool stuff that we're working on in our own way, and really tapping into the power of things like AI, automation, to help deliver accessibility better, faster, and ultimately a better experience for our customers and our own people.
Great, thank you. How about you, Irene? You've got a conference not very far away. It's ages away, don't worry about it. What else is on the horizon for you? I mean, the stuff in Africa really is taking off, I feel, for you, and the work, the legwork you put into to build those relationships is really starting to flourish, as you said about the standards.
Yeah, and the first thing I'm thinking about is that accessibility is very intimidating for so many people and for so many businesses. So it's important as we begin to make progress. As Sarah said, we have to keep going, but let's celebrate the small milestone, quick wins that we have. But I think for me, most importantly, I'm listening to Mali here, is just the power of collaboration. In Africa, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to make any mistakes that have already been made. So if we can collaborate, and whether it's with Microsoft, I think, Jessica, we were having a conversation about how Microsoft has a really good neurodiverse program that really businesses in Africa can benefit from, where we can sit down and have conversations and learn from each other and know what to do, what not to do. But what you'll find is that even businesses in Africa will educate Microsoft on some of their experiences that maybe Microsoft never had. So when I think about financial services, it's actually one of the most sensitive topics in Africa, because what happens when products are not accessible, we use money mobile applications a lot. And some of you may know an application called M-Pesa. Most of these applications, even from the banking sector, are not accessible. So what most people do, we've actually done some studies. What we found is that sometimes even less than 10% to 15% of people with disabilities use digital products. They prefer going into the bank, which is very inconveniencing. And if they use, let's say, the digital products, what happens if I'm blind? I'll give somebody else my application to log into my account and do everything. So is that banking really? Safety, security is all gone. But most of the time, they lose money because you're trusting someone and you hope everything goes well. Why am I saying this? Because I do believe the progress that has been made by different organizations, different companies, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's a smaller company, whether it's HSBC, can add value to what we are doing in Africa. So I do believe in the power of collaboration, and that's what I'm hoping we can do. We have 1.4 billion people in Africa. So if you can imagine, 80% of people with disabilities live in developing countries. So there's a huge percentage of people who need accessibility in Africa. So if we work together, we can definitely make progress. Thank you.
Cool. Well, make sure that we find out what everyone can do to help with that. Yeah. Jessica, what are you? What's on your desk when you get back? Apart from your head, because you'll be asleep.
Take a little nap, squeeze my 3 baby boys. Okay, so number one, discoverability. It's something that we definitely need to work on. Our engineers are working hard to create features for people with disabilities into our products, and we need people to know about it. So a little bit of homework for folks. If you're on Windows 11, Windows key U is how you access accessibility features. If anyone says, I don't know how to use my features on my Windows device, Windows key U, a little homework. And then number 2 is innovation. So I know we've heard a lot about Copilot today, but Robin gave me some homework, where Robin is. And this is something that a lot of folks are asking about, access to Copilot, and hurry up. So I promise we're working on it.
Cool, thank you. Susanna, IAAP, well, you've got a busy year, presumably you're presumably this time next year, you're signing off the IAAP, moving on to some other part of your career.
Yes, so I hope that the standardization and legal stuff won't take all of my next year, but I'm afraid it will take quite a lot. But I also do have a day job, and I look forward to what is happening in the speech recognition and speech technology and all the languages in the EU, because that is many of the kind of cool things that happens in English. Okay, good for you, but what about everyone else? So I'm looking forward to that changing, and it has started to change a little bit, so it goes faster now. And I think there's a lot of things we can also collaborate and work together on, but that would really make a big change for many people in the EU. And then probably when that is kind of stable in the EU, maybe we'll turn to the big guys will turn to Africa, who knows? But I mean, there's a lot of different languages that needs to be supported by all of this new technology, and also in assistive devices. So that's where I see kind of a speedy development that I think will really benefit many of us. And then we also have a focus on user experience and kind of leveraging the expertise of users with disabilities. So we have several research projects where we focus on making sure that people with disabilities know their rights to provide feedback within the legal system of the EU, and also to make sure that some of them, if they are interested, and that can also become accessibility experts, because I think that's really the untapped resource of expertise, or one of the untapped resources at least, that we need to make sure that we get on board if we want to grow the accessibility community and profession quickly. So yeah, and then we also focus on cognitive and on kind of the groups that are not always covered by standards and legislation. So now we do a project on stuttering, for example, and I'm very interested in kind of finding those small bits and pieces where nobody else is talking about, and I think it's always nice to shed lights on those. So now I've said focus 20 times, so you can see how much I focus on things. Yeah, so yeah.
It's about as focus as my question.
Yeah.
Okay, one of the things I'm going to ask you about, again, I'm sort of not placing you outside the community, but representing the Venn diagram of our communities. Do you think that there's stuff we could be doing next year to connect more across the disability inclusion and accessibility divide? What sorts of things can you see that we could be doing more of? How well known are our two communities to each other? We probably represent here the middle of that Venn diagram, but there's plenty of people out there not in either sort of join.
Great question, great questions. You do a good job in giving lots of questions all at the same time, but that's your prerogative. It's good. Couple of thoughts. So our mission is to build the inner confidence of people with disabilities, disabled people, via the global growth of ERGs, BRGs, networks, affinity groups, called different things in different places. And next year, so October 15 of next year, we are going to put on the world's first global summit for ERG leaders around the world. So we've just announced our first partner, Financial Times, our media partner. And the objective is to distill the needs, the desires, the wants, the priorities as expressed by employees with disability around the world. So it's building on the nothing without us principle. So to your question, I think that Venn diagram, what I'd like to see, because we hear constantly how through the establishment and sustainability of great high-performing ERGs, that ultimately are not necessarily the decision makers within a business, but they are so much part of the decision-making process to be untrue now. So for me, it's about how we can support those ERGs to build best-in-class principles around the user testing. Because sometimes we do see those user tests, those communities within businesses who are over-relied on, or taken a little bit for granted, dare I say it. So that's what I'd like to see, is a really better connect. So yeah, expect a call, Mark, because I think we're going to swap places on the 15th of October. Because this community is just fantastic. And I think what we could do is a better job of bringing together those different communities. Yeah, cool. Get a better bang for buck.
Great, thank you. Well, got a few minutes. Has anybody got either anything to say or anything to ask before we break? Anybody want to offer any comments? You're very welcome to say your thoughts about what's happened or what's happening. No? I will point out there's some wine just outside. I'm coming back to you, Marley, just because you're the host with the most. You've had a brilliant time, and your team has been amazing as well. Our team has been great. Your team's been great. It's been fantastic. I hope everybody here has felt welcomed. That you've been that you've enjoyed the content, but also the experience of being here. We certainly have, and I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody, and thank you to you for being here. So thank you. We're going to break now and go outside and have some drinks, and then you can go home. Thank you.